right, kids, we're going to move on to part 4 and concentrate on the Pacific theater of World War II. So, the overall topic is part 4, the Pacific theater at the end of World War II. And our first subtopic is war in the Pacific. Now, it's kind of interesting because you have 2 theaters of the war. And if we go back, it was kind of interesting because American troops that were assigned to fight in Europe used to joke about the easy life that the American soldiers had that were fighting in the Pacific. And they used to, that was kind of considered true because they had time to lounge on the beach and that type of thing. So the circumstances were much more relaxing, so to speak, for those American soldiers in the Pacific than in Europe. However, that was true between battles because some of these battles that we're going to talk about in the Pacific were the most horrifying fights that were ever seen by man. So if you try to compare the dangers in the Pacific to Europe, both were very, very dangerous. But I think that your chances of being killed were much easier in the Pacific than it was in Europe. Although they joke that how they wish they were in the Pacific because of the easy life. Now the reason it was so different is the Japanese troops were incredibly loyal, and they worked for an emperor that basically had their complete loyalty. So they were taught never to surrender, ever. They were to die before they would ever surrender. So surrender really isn't an option in the Pacific. And that's why this becomes so doggone difficult and why we have such a loss of life on the Allied side, mainly American, because of the philosophy of the Japanese that they were to die before they would surrender. They were incredibly loyal to the emperor. Now, of course, we've all heard probably the best example of this loyalty I'm talking about were the soldiers that were considered kamikaze pilots, okay? And, you just didn't see American pilots flying their planes into Japanese vessels to destroy them and give up their life so easily. That was not ingrained so much in American soldiers. But kamikaze pilots were actually volunteers. These people weren't selected or forced into it. These were volunteers who flew bomb-laden planes directly into American destroyers and aircraft carriers that, with the sole purpose of creating enormous damage. So that was their mission. They knew when they took off, and they volunteered for this, is the point I want to make, that they were flying a suicide death mission with a plane loaded with bombs into either an American destroyer or an aircraft carrier. And the philosophy was to kill the enemy and to cause enormous damage to those vessels. So basically what I'm saying is that it was tougher in the Pacific in a lot of ways to fight than it was in Europe. Does anybody know what the word kamikaze means? No? It means divine wind. And there's a story behind it. Kamikaze means divine wind. Wind, yep, just like a breeze. Now the kamikaze meant divine wind. D-I-V-I-N-E, wind. Just like a divine wind. Boy, that's a nice divine wind today. Nice wind. Wind. Now, the reason they gave the kamikaze, why it meant divine wind, is it had to do with the previous war that the Japanese had fought in a country called Mongolia. And what happened is the Mongolian invasion force was coming upon Japan, and all of a sudden a storm, or what they called a divine wind, came up during the war, and this wind destroyed the Mongolian invasion force, which won the war for Japan. So kamikaze means divine wind. That would be a wind that would be, I guess, divine or positive for you. And it referred to a previous war that the Japanese had fought several years back in Mongolia. And what happened is a storm, or what they considered a divine wind, came up during this war and destroyed a Mongolian invasion force which won the war for Japan. So they saw that wind as a divine wind, a positive wind. So the kamikaze meant divine wind. It was an honor for those pilots to give up their lives in cause of the war. That's different, and we'll see some of that in Vietnam as well. The philosophy of the enemy to be able to give up life can make a huge difference in a war. It happened in World War II, and it happened in Vietnam. We'll talk about that. So that's all I really mean by war in the Pacific. We're going to move into strategy in the Pacific and early victories. Okay, we're going to tell you what the American strategy was in the Pacific, and we'll talk about some early victories that America had in the Pacific. So, strategy in the Pacific and early victories. Now, somebody's going to direct his strategy, and the strategy in the Pacific on the part of the Americans consisted of what they called a three-pronged attack of Japan. So the American strategy in the Pacific is going to consist of a three-pronged attack of Japan. And somebody has to direct this three-pronged attack and take responsibility for making sure this strategy is carried out. And the attacks will be directed by an American admiral by the name of Chester W. Nimitz. It'll be Chester W. Nimitz, an American admiral, that will direct this three-pronged attack of Japan, which is the American strategy in the Pacific. It will be directed by American Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. And here was the three-pronged attack that was set up. Number one, air, land, and naval forces were going to strike westward at the Japanese-held islands in the Central Pacific Ocean. Air, land, and naval forces are going to strike westward at the Japanese-held islands in the Central Pacific. American air, land, and naval forces are going to strike westward at Japanese-held islands in the Central Pacific. It might be wise at this point, and to have it in front of you for the next day or so, that map of the Pacific theater of World War II, so you're going to be able to see these islands that we're talking about. So everybody reach in their three-ring binder, if you would, as we continue here, and grab your map on the Pacific theater of the war. It should be right kind of by your Pearl Harbor handout, I'm guessing. And I just think it'd be wise to have that in front of you, because that would make a big difference in you understanding what we're talking about in this material. I'd even take it out of your three-ring binder like Kyle has done here, and kind of have it on your desk so you can kind of see what we're doing. Hey, let me see yours, Kyle. Looks just like this. Right side up would be better. It says World War II Pacific Theater. World War II Pacific Theater. Here it is. Okay, so the first, I'll repeat that again, the first of the three-pronged attack of Japan is air, land, and naval forces striking westward at the Japanese-held islands, and that's these islands in the Central Pacific. The second part of the plan is American Admiral William F. Halsey is going to drive the Japanese from the Solomon Islands. Remember, after they took the Philippines, they were heading towards where? Australia, and they had captured what? The Solomon Islands. Okay, so a fleet under American Admiral William F. Halsey is going to drive the Japanese out of the Solomon Islands. That's the second prong of the three-pronged attack, is a fleet under American Admiral William F. Halsey is going to drive the Japanese from the Solomon Islands. And what is General Douglas MacArthur trying to do at this point? I shall return. He's trying to return back to the Philippines, remember, when he left. And so the third part of the three-part prong in the attack of Japan is General Douglas MacArthur is going to advance with troops along the coast of New Guinea and move again toward the Philippine Islands to try to recapture that area that he had to abandon. Okay? So General Douglas MacArthur is going to advance with troops along the coast of New Guinea and then move on to the Philippine Islands to try to make his famous I shall return happen. And who'd he leave in charge to never surrender, but they already did? Major General Jonathan Wainwright. Okay? Now, what's the ultimate objective in this three-pronged attack? What are they trying to do? What's the United States setting themselves up for? What do they want to do to make this thing go away in the Pacific? Or within bombing distance, or to make an invasion upon the homeland. So the whole objective, the ultimate objective in this three-pronged attack would be to capture the areas and ready themselves for a final assault on the mainland of Japan. That's the plan here. They want to gain control of these areas and ready themselves for a final assault on the mainland of Japan. Because we believe at this time, the United States, that to win this war, we are going to have to invade mainland Japan. We're going to have to invade Japan. Okay? So to do that, we got to secure these areas. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, victories occurred before the end of 1943. Most of New Guinea had been recovered. Before the end of 1943, most of New Guinea had been recovered. American and New Zealand forces also won victories in the Solomon Islands, so we're making progress. We've captured most of New Guinea. American and New Zealand forces also won victories in the Solomon Islands. Okay? Well, we talked about Admiral Nimitz, right? He's the man that was responsible to carry out this whole three-pronged strategy. Well, he's also in the fight. He's in the Central Pacific, and his fleet is moving into the Gilbert Islands. They're moving into the Gilbert Islands, and what happens there is they are going to base American Marines to try to seize an important Japanese base known as Tarawa. Tarawa. That's a key island in the Pacific because it's going to give us control of naval bases there, which is needed to be used, as Mason said, to secure an invasion of Japan. So while American troops are winning in New Guinea under MacArthur, American and New Zealand forces also are winning in the Solomon Islands, and meanwhile in the Central Pacific, Admiral Nimitz, his fleet is moving into the Gilbert Islands, where the American Marines are going to try to seize the important Japanese base of Tarawa. Now this is an incredible battle, because in this battle, the American Marines that they landed at Tarawa, 90% were lost in some units capturing this island. 90% lost in some units. So it was a very difficult battle. So what's your ratio of survivors in this thing? Small. Matter of fact, one American soldier who fought at Tarawa was later quoted as saying that surviving this battle was, quote, like walking through a waterfall and not getting wet. That's how he described the opportunity to survive the Battle of Tarawa. One American soldier was quoted as saying that his surviving the Battle at Tarawa was like, quote, walking through a waterfall and not getting wet. That's how he compared his survival. Where else are we dislodging the Japanese that we talked about really early in our lecture, that they were we were concerned because it was bordering American property? Alaska, the Aleutian Islands. So during this process that we're talking about, the Gilbert Islands and the Solomon Islands and New Guinea, we're also dislodging the Japanese from the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, because that was a threat to the United States. So that's another area in the Pacific that we are fighting hard to re-secure, is the Aleutian Islands. Now we have success in New Guinea, we have success in the Solomon Islands, we have success in the Gilbert Islands, including Tarawa. We have success in dislodging the Japanese from the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, but there still are many, many major Japanese positions in the Pacific that we have not touched yet, that we need to secure to do what? Invade Japan. So that would take us then to our next subtopic, which is the Allies go island hopping in the Pacific. And basically what we're going to do is hop from island to island to try to secure those bases so we can prepare ourselves for an invasion of Japan. So the Allies go island hopping in the Pacific. I'm just going to basically tell you the hopping we're doing. Now, by 1944, a lot of Allied troops and a lot of Allied supplies were arriving in the Pacific. Okay, the war is winding down in Europe. We can see victory in a way in sight. So we're committing a ton of Allied troops to the Pacific, and we're sending a lot of supplies by 1944. Well, on January 31st of 1944, the Allies struck the Marshall Islands. On January 31st, 1944, the Allies struck the Marshall Islands, capturing in specifics the island of Kwajalein. So on January 31st, 1944, on July 31st, 1944, the Allies struck the Marshall Islands and they captured the island of Kwajalein. Now, the reason they needed to capture Kwajalein is because that was the key island in gaining control of the entire Marshall Islands. That's the island they had to get, and they were successful in that. Well, from the Marshall Islands, we're going to move on to the Caroline Islands. From the Marshall Islands to the Caroline Islands. Hello? Yes. They're coming today at lunch. Well, the lady said she would be here about 11:30 and set up in the lunchroom, but obviously I'm not there, but yeah, okay. Yep, you bet. Okay, so we're going to move from the Marshall Islands to the Caroline Islands. Yes, Nick? Yeah, we're going to get to that. I'm just guessing. Now, what they did is once they established Allied military bases at Kwajalein, from those bases, they sent fleets of B-24 bombers to blast the island of Truk, which was a Japanese stronghold in the Caroline Islands. So after capturing Kwajalein, they established control of that base, and from there, the Allies sent fleets of B-24 bombers that were going to blast the island of Truk, which was again a major Japanese stronghold in the Caroline Islands. You see how they're bouncing from Marshall Islands to Caroline Islands? That's what they're doing. Now, the reason they're jumping from island to island is they're trying to destroy Japanese control of that area, like we talked about. Now, as all this is going on, as they're striking the Marshall Islands and the Caroline Islands, meanwhile, General MacArthur is advancing in New Guinea, and he's making his move back toward the Philippines. Okay? So you've got lots of things going on. You've got island hopping in the Pacific, and you've got General MacArthur preparing for his return to the Philippines as he advances in New Guinea towards the Philippines, where he was forced to depart earlier in the war. Well, the next islands that are captured by the Allies in their island hopping procedure were Guam and Saipan. Two islands that the Allies continued to pursue and captured in the Pacific were Guam and Saipan. Now, I just want you to understand that the American sea and air power has enabled the Allies to seize all these key positions in the Pacific, all needed for a final invasion of Japan, which they are anticipating. Okay? Now, when we start taking these islands, what are these Japanese forces doing? They're retreating and going to what? Well, not homeland, but good guess. They're going to other islands in the Pacific. Okay? Other islands in the Pacific. Okay, that'll take us to a very short subtopic and then we'll be done for the day, and that's victory in the Philippines. Now the point I'm making is they scramble to these other islands like Iwo Jima, then we have to continue our island hopping and capture those as well. But we'll talk about victory in the Philippines first. Now probably the most gratifying news from the Pacific Theater by that time, and the most historic, was the Allies reconquering the Philippines. And in October of 1945, naval forces moved up from the New Guinea Solomon Islands theater of the war. Remember, they were recapturing those. And then troops from Guam and Saipan all converged on the beaches of Leyte. So in October of 1944, naval forces that were moving up from the New Guinea Solomon Islands theater, which we've talked about, okay, they joined forces with troops that had just finished taking Guam and Saipan, and those naval forces from New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, along with the troops from Guam and Saipan, converge upon the beaches of Leyte, which is in the central Philippines. Okay, so they're going to try to re-establish and recapture the Philippines, and they start by capturing the beaches of Leyte in the central part of the Philippines. And they capture that land, and where do they go in early February of 1945 to assure that MacArthur makes his famous return? Manila, the capital. So, Leyte is established in October of 1944. Allied forces storm the beaches of Leyte and take control of that central Philippine island. They continue to move on, and by early